In the 1970s, Flint felt indestructible, not because it was flashy or beautiful, but because it seemed essential. The city existed for one reason, and everyone knew what it was. General Motors wasn't just an employer, it was the atmosphere. It shaped the skyline, the schedule, the confidence of the place. Flint didn't wonder whether it mattered to the country. It knew it did. Days were structured by factory time. Whistles marked the hours. Parking lots filled and emptied in waves. Shift changes sent rivers of people through the streets, lunch pails in hand, moving with purpose. Traffic surged, diners filled, bars opened early, and then everything settled again. The rhythm was mechanical, but comforting. Life moved to the beat of production, and nobody questioned it. Work and identity were inseparable here. You weren't just from Flint. You worked at Buick, Chevy, Fisher Body, or one of the countless parts plants feeding the system. Last names were tied to departments. Families measured time in years worked, not jobs held. To belong in Flint was to be part of something larger than yourself, something that built real things the nation depended on. There was confidence in that knowledge, a quiet pride. Flint didn't market itself or apologize for its smoke-stained air and gray winters. This was the cost of importance. The city believed, sincerely, that as long as America drove cars, Flint would be fine. Permanence wasn't an idea, it was an assumption. In the 1970s, Flint still felt whole, secure, proud. The streets carried the weight of certainty, the sense that tomorrow would arrive just like today. The city had no language yet for collapse, no reason to imagine an ending. It was a place built on motion, production, and faith in the machine. And for the moment in time, it felt untouchable. Work wasn't a choice. It was the foundation of life. General Motors didn't just dominate the economy, it defined the future. The plant stretched across the city like a nervous system. Assembly lines, foundries, stamping plants, parts suppliers, all feeding one another in a constant loop of motion. Tens of thousands of people moved through those gates every day, badges clipped, lunch pails packed, certain of where they belonged. A GM job meant more than a paycheck. It meant security. Union wages were strong, benefits were guaranteed, and pensions were something you planned your life around. You knew what you'd make when you'd retire and how your family would be taken care of. High school seniors didn't stress about careers. They waited for their number to come up. Graduation was followed by orientation, not uncertainty. A job at the plant wasn't temporary. It was a lifetime. One income could do what two or three struggle to do now. You bought a modest home, raised kids, paid the bills, and still had room to breathe. Vacations were predictable. Cars were new, and often built by your own hands. There was pride in that, driving something you helped create, knowing the country was full of people relying on your work. The city trusted the system completely. Why wouldn't it? GM had always been there. The plants had always expanded. Layoffs felt unthinkable, and failure felt abstract. Automation, competition, oil shocks. Those were distant ideas, not personal threats. Flint operated under a shared belief that as long as the lines kept moving, everything else would hold. In the 1970s, that belief still felt solid. The machines were loud, the shifts were long, but the future felt guaranteed. Flint didn't worry about what would happen if GM ever pulled back, because in that moment, it couldn't imagine a world where it would. Flint in the 1970s was a city built in tight circles, and those circles were called neighborhoods. Entire blocks rose and fell together, shaped by the shifts at nearby plants. Streets emptied in the early morning, filled again in the afternoon, and settled into quiet predictability by night. Life moved in patterns everyone understood. The neighborhoods were dense and modest, small houses, front porches worn smooth by years of sitting, garages filled with tools and half-finished projects, basements that doubled as rec rooms and storage. These weren't show homes. They were lived in. People took pride in keeping things up, mowing lawns, shoveling snow, fixing what broke instead of replacing it. Community didn't need to be organized. It already existed. Block parties spilled into the street in summer. Churches anchored Sundays. Bowling leagues, union picnics, and local bars filled the calendar. Kids walked to neighborhood schools and played outside until dinner. Adults recognized faces, even if they didn't know names. Everyone knew who worked where. There was a deep sense of belonging. Most people didn't leave because there was no reason to. Work was close. Family was nearby. The future was predictable. You grew up, you got hired, you bought a house not far from where you started. The city rewarded staying put. Pride lived in the everyday. It wasn't loud or performative. It was earned through routine, responsibility, and reliability. Flint neighborhoods in the 1970s felt stable because they were built on shared purpose. People trusted the city, trusted their jobs, and trusted that the life they were living would last. Flint's culture in the 1970s wasn't about spectacle. It was about belonging. The city didn't need to entertain itself with illusions of greatness because its importance felt obvious. General Motors gave Flint a national relevance, and that knowledge shaped how people carried themselves. There was pride in being from a place that built the backbone of American life. Downtown still mattered then. Department stores, movie theaters, diners, and storefronts gave people a reason to gather. Weekends meant errands downtown, not malls miles away. Streets were active, businesses were local. The city center still felt like a shared space rather than a forgotten one. High school sports were a point of unity. Friday nights brought packed bleachers, familiar faces, and collective investment in something local. Victories mattered. Losses were shared. These weren't just games. They were extensions of neighborhood identity and civic pride. Union halls played a role beyond labor. They were meeting places, social hubs, and symbols of protection. Weddings, meetings, benefits, and celebrations happened under union banners. The union wasn't abstract. It was present in daily life, reinforcing the sense that workers mattered and were seen. Everything in Flint revolved around routine and predictability. Life wasn't fast, but it was reliable. People trusted the system, trusted the schedule, trusted the city. Culture grew from that stability, from shared purpose rather than distraction. In the 1970s, Flint still believed in itself, not because it had to, but because nothing had yet given it a reason not to. By the end of the 1970s, Flint was still standing, still working. But the ground beneath it had begun to shift. The change didn't arrive as a shock. It came quietly, almost politely, hidden inside slowdowns, temporary layoffs, and conversations people didn't linger on. The plants were still running, but the certainty that once surrounded them had started to thin. Oil crises exposed how dependent the city was on forces it didn't control. Foreign competition crept into the market. Early automation hinted at a future where fewer hands would be needed on the line. At first, these pressures felt manageable. Temporary disruptions in an otherwise permanent system. Flint had weathered storms before. It assumed it always would. Beneath the surface, long-standing tensions were becoming harder to ignore. Opportunity was uneven. Neighborhoods didn't benefit equally. Downtown traffic began to fade, storefronts closed earlier, and the city center slowly lost gravity. None of it felt catastrophic yet, just unfamiliar. That's what makes the 1970s such a haunting chapter in Flint's story. It was the last decade where confidence outweighed concern. The last time most people believed the future was locked in and guaranteed. The city still functioned, still believed in the machine, unaware of how quickly that machine would pull away. Looking back, the tragedy isn't that Flint failed. It's that it trusted something that was never built to protect it forever. If this story resonated with you, like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into American cities before the shift. Places that once felt permanent, powerful, and secure. And tell me in the comments, what city should we explore next?